for melodic heavy metal. Playing it heavier, louder, raunchier, faster. This is the Signals of Intuition.
There's the Kings before you right there, featuring Chris Jericho on vocals and Phil Demmel on guitars. That is the lead-off single from James Durbin's brand new album, The Beast Awakens. You're listening to the Signals of Intuition, your home for melodic hard rock and heavy metal. And tonight on the show, we've got the singer of that track, Mr. James Durbin, who you might know as the heavy metal singer from American Idol from 2011. He ended up singing with Judas Priest live for the finale that year. James has also played with Quiet Riot and released a number of other hard rock solo albums through the years. So let's get James on the line right now.
Hello.
Hey, James, how's it going? It's Brandon calling from the Signals of Intuition in Windsor. How you doing?
I am great.
I'm doing all right. Doing all right.
Awesome.
So when I do these, I always like to start at the beginning of you as a musician and then work our way up to the new album, The Beast Awakens. So starting from the beginning, where did you grow up and how did you get started in music?
I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, where I still live, my hometown. And I first got into music. My dad was a musician, though he wasn't around. My parents were separated and he ended up passing away when I was 9. But I was very influenced by him and just this idea of him. He was more like a mythological creature, so to speak, just because he didn't come around very much, but he had long hair and he had tattoos and he rode a motorcycle and he played bass, and everybody that I've ever heard from that ever experienced him perform live just said he was the greatest musician in feel and timing and emotion and performance and musicality and musicianship and everything, like just a total brother. But my real musical interest happened driving around in the car with my mom and my sisters, my 2 older sisters. And my mom would play our local oldies station, which at the time was K-Ocean 105, and it was a Motown station. So I grew up listening to the Supremes and the Temptations and the Jacksons and Marvin Gaye and Al Green, and just understanding what soul is, the Commodores, and understanding you can be moved and you can move people with music, positive and negative, happy and sad. And I latched on to Michael Jackson. I saw a video of him coming up through the floor in a spaceship. It was the History Tour. And this 10-minute intro of this spaceship rising up through the floor of the stage and people just losing their minds. And then 5 minutes later, the hatch of the door explodes off and the spaceman steps out in white and gold and stands there for another 5 minutes and then removes his helmet as people are dying in the audience because they're screaming to death, just losing it completely at the sight of Mr. Jackson and understanding more of that performance. That's a performance entirely. He knows timing. And then I took that to musical theater. My oldest sister, Deanna, was in high school production of Damn Yankees, where she had the lead female role. And I fell in love with it. I learned every song. I went to every performance. I got my mom to drop me off and give me $2 to get a dad's root beer and a box of Junior Mints, and I'd be set for the next 2.5 hours, and just sit there at the front of the stage, on the floor with my baseball uniform on from T-ball, and fell in love with the show and the music and the performance of it. And on the final night, the cast brought me up on stage, and they didn't keep me in the ensemble. They pushed me right out into the front. And I'm up there in my little hat and my cleats singing, "Wow, we think about the game. And I fell in love with it at that moment. And I realized so many things in that moment of performance, of moving people with music, with song, just the stage itself, and that you have power over the audience in that moment to control their emotions if you can, take them on that journey if you're able to. And that's what I fell in love with.
So how old would you have been at that point? I'm guessing maybe 5, something like that?
No, I was about 8 or 9.
8 or 9, okay. When did you start, like, did you take proper singing lessons or guitar lessons? Because you're a guitar player as well, right?
Yeah, I took singing lessons. I took a lot of singing lessons through our church, and different church programs that were provided through local church, and did a lot of kids, like, community theater through that. I was in all the choirs growing up, and choirs in middle school, and just the regular ensemble choir, and got chosen for the state of California's honor choir that a few years. In high school, I was in men's chorus and mixed chorus, jazz choir, as well as musical theater. And then I got my first guitar when I was 10, just after my dad had passed away, and it was a hand-me-down guitar. It didn't entirely work. It's got some dead zones. I've still got it. I take it out every once in a while just to remind myself that's where it started. I got given that and a chord book of Elvis songs, and the first song I taught myself to play was Heartbreak Hotel.
Well, there you go. And so you're obviously influenced by, musical theater and all that kind of thing. When do you get, I'm guessing other than Motown, your obvious big influence, that at least I know you for, and that your new album is kind of old school metal. When do you start to discover that and fall in love with that sound?
I was definitely in high school. When I was in high school, it was around the time that the phase in popular music was the emo scene. Bands like My Chemical Romance, Panic at the Disco, and very theatrical bands, Him, 30 Seconds to Mars, Fall Out Boy, that sort of thing, AFI. A few of those bands I really, really loved and was really inspired by. But through that, I always like to find what inspired them and what inspired this kind of music. And so during high school, I made friends with a buddy of mine named Chris, and he introduced me to, he's like, okay, well, that's cool and all, but like, what of like older rock do you listen to? And I said, well, I don't know. Do you have anything I should listen to? And he gave me Green Day's greatest hits, and then he gave me Motorhead greatest hits. And he said, all right, well, go home, listen to these, and let me know which one, which road you want to go down. Do you want the blue pill or the red pill? And I loved the Green Day album just for the musicality and the hooks and, the sing-songiness of it, the angst. But the Motorhead really struck me of the power, the energy. It was raw, it was aggressive. And then we went from there. That kind of started it. And then I took the reins of that myself and took it to where I wanted to go. Finding Iron Maiden and Dio and Black Sabbath and Judas Priest changed everything, and even Quiet Riot, seeing Kevin DeBro up there and just like, oh my God, he just goes for it, Led Zeppelin and all of it. So I really fell in love with that. And around the time that my voice started to change, I knew that it was going to drop deeper, but I said, I want to train my voice to go higher. I was already a singer at that point. I'd already been singing in different choirs and such for 8 years or so. And I really wanted to extend my range up. And this kind of music allowed me that, knowing like, oh, I could take my voice from singing choir-wise, like, falsettos and stuff, to really like, yeah, and like power it up and see like, okay, I've got Rob Halford over here, and I've got Bruce Dickinson over here, and and we've got Robert Plant over there, and Freddie Mercury, and Steve Perry, and like all these different guys all around the board. Of like, okay, they all do it differently. I'll take a little bit from here. I'll figure out what I would do is I would put on YouTube. It was like early stages of YouTube, but like when things really started to get put up, and so. There was some musical theater stuff in there too. This guy named Drew Sarich, who is a Broadway performer. He's been on like Les Mis and Jekyll and Hyde and Jesus Christ Superstar all over the world and on Broadway. And I found his performances of Jesus Christ Superstar, of both Jesus and Judas, and his Jesus, like just where he takes these songs is just nuts, and his scream and everything. And it was mixing the two things I was so enamored with at the time, which was musical theater and heavy metal, and took that to joining my first band, which I joined through theater, the pit drummer in the band for one of the plays I was in, which was Grease, and I played the lead of Danny. he said, dude, your voice is great. It'd be great. I've got a band called Leviathan, and we need a singer because we're tired of listening to our guitar player struggle through the songs. So they brought me in, and we did this, got to mix styles. And I got to bring in my Dio to their more thrash vibe. These 14-year-olds just just playing these insane thrash licks and solos and everything, and listening back to it's hilarious. And it sucks, which is great because you have to suck. You have to start somewhere. But I'm just in love with music in general, and heavy metal is in there, but so is reggae, so is country, so is folk, bards songs, all that stuff. And like with this album is like being able to bring all of that in. I'm inspired by all these different types of music because they all offer something else, whether it's storytelling or different ways to find the hook in the music, feelings, rhythms, textures, moods, and being able to pull from such a vast catalog of influences has been really great. And it's fun to figure out where I can fit those into the genre of heavy metal.
It's very cool. It's funny. I play in a band, and my drummer got his start as a pit drummer in productions as well. So it's just kind of
nice.
It's one of those things, like it just kind of brought a little smile to my face for you to say, oh, that's where my drummer came from, initially.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the guy that ended up producing and mixing this album.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so we'll use that for a jump-off point in a little bit. One thing, I was looking through your biography, and one thing I was shocked to learn is that you were in Alan Parsons' The Art of Science and Sound Recording.
Yes.
And it's so funny because when that came out, I was in school and took a sound course and was taught by someone who knew nothing about sound, so it pretty much came down to knowing what I sort of knew, having done an album and worked with a producer, but I discovered that DVD, and I think I've watched it about 5 times, so at some point I've got to go back and rewatch that and see you actually on it. How did you become a part of that?
I got contacted locally through my mentor, Dale Ackerman, who is just a journeyman musician, played with the Doobie Brothers for 8 years, and he's friends with the producer of that series, would you call it, and named Julian Colbeck. And so it just all happened to be done here in Santa Cruz. The groundwork of it, as Julian lives here, and so does Dale, my mentor. And yeah, it just, I don't know, these pieces just went together. I was auditioning for American Idol in 2008 when I didn't make it on. And it was the same weekend as recording the Art and Science of Sound recording in Oakland, I believe it was. But just getting to work with Alan, like at that point, like I know a lot more now of how like influential and more of Alan now and his music and what he did for music. So more than I knew then, but I did know like, oh, this guy is, big deal, and, produced and mixed these albums that I'm in love with. And, that stuff means more to me now than it did then. I was 18 or 19. So, but just the experience of working with him was really something. And just because I didn't have a expectation, I didn't know what to expect working with him. And because I was less familiar with him, I think it made for an even better experience because we just worked. I didn't realize I was singing one of his songs. I didn't realize I was singing with his singer and telling his singer like, oh, I think that this harmony would sound really good here. And it was just basically what I filmed was kind of just B-roll for the series itself, because you can't really hear what I'm singing. It's just it's really buried. It's just I'm there for something to look at, which is a joke in itself. 19-year-old me is nothing to look at, But it's something I'm stoked I had the opportunity to do. It was a lot of fun, and it was narrated by Billy Bob Thornton. So, there's that too. I
didn't realize he was in that either. It's funny how just into recording and learning the concepts I was to not, to completely ignore all the celebrityness of it, as you will. So I would like to ask you a little bit about Idol. I'm sure you've talked about it to death, so I don't want to overdo it, obviously. But the first time that I became aware of you was You've Got Another Thing Coming. I think the whole metal community saw that and went, oh my God, we're actually getting some metal on American Idol. This is the coolest thing ever. So you said you'd already auditioned for it once. Tell me how the show works kind of week to week. From what I understand, you're kind of like locked in for like a few months or something at a time.
Yeah, so you sign a contract, and if you've got nothing to lose, you sign the contract. I heard a great quote. I don't know who said it, but it's, if you can quit, quit. If you can quit, if you've got it in you to quit, quit. So just like signing the contract for Idol, if you've got nothing to lose, you've got everything to gain, let's go on this journey. So we went on the journey. We played the game. And once you go, you're locked in. You're there. You live there. You're under their guidance, under their rule, so to speak, if you will. And week to week, sometimes we were staying in hotels. At a certain point, we got moved to a mansion, which was haunted. I saw an arm fall in the garage, so we got moved to another hotel. Very interesting. But week to week, I mean, you're given a list of songs to choose from, or you can bring songs to the woman that cleared the songs, named Robin. You could bring songs to her and see if she can have them cleared. And then you practice your songs, and there's so many different things that are going on. I'd love to look back at a schedule and really dig in. But I believe our performance nights were Wednesday. The result night is Thursday. If you make it through, you've already chosen your song for the following week. You chose it on Tuesday. So you do your performance of that week's song, then Thursday is the results. If you make it past the results, you stick around that night for getting everything ready to go into the studio the following day to do mentor sessions for the next week, as well as pick your song, and you'll even maybe start to work on the recording with the producer. Then Saturdays was some kind of press, a red carpet or something like that, or different interviews, that sort of thing. Sunday, we would go and film commercials for Ford music videos, which even though they only lasted, 45 seconds to a minute, it took us 15 hours to film those, not including them turning them around, with effects and rendering and all that stuff for a showing on the following Thursday. But then Monday would roll around, we'd go into the studio again, we'd record, and then Tuesday was all-day rehearsal, Wednesday is all-day rehearsal, and then the performance. So it's kind of that ongoing. But with You've Got Another Thing Coming was top 24. We did top 12 girls night the first night, and then top 12 guys night. And for that, they gave me a list. It was like a 3-page list of songs to choose from. And I looked through it a couple times. I didn't see anything. And I went to the producers and I said, can I request a song? And they just said, there's just too many of you. We've got, not enough time to get through everything. And so you have to choose something from the list. And so I looked back through it and just so happened to see You've Got Another Thing Coming, Judas Priest. And I said, is this a fluke? Is this supposed to be on here? And I took it to them and I gave them the song and I said, all right, this is the song I want to sing. And they said, what the fuck is a Judas Priest and why is it on our list? And I said, well, that's the song I'm singing. So that's what I'm doing. You can't take it away from me. You'll never get me alive, coppers. Nah. And I went for it. I went to rehearsals and they played it through. And I was like, no, this is Judas Priest. Turn the guitars up, turn the gain up, turn the master all the way up, turn the gain completely up. Can I go EQ your amp for you? Doesn't anybody have a drive pedal around here? Come on.
The mix too. That's one thing that
mix.
always stood out is that this is the least metal mix of this song I have ever heard.
Yeah. And just trying to get it more and more. And it's like what we ended up with is 5 times more distortion than we had to start with, and even still it's dry, but just going for it. Why not? That was what was so much fun about that, is week after week is just showing yourself, showing people who you are by singing other people's songs. It's a crazy concept, but I had so much fun with that. And then to hear that Judas Priest and Halford they heard it and that they enjoyed it. And then hearing people talk about performances after they happened and, getting people on your side and all that stuff. And then it came time for the finale and they approached me and said, we've got couple bands interested in playing with you. We've got Def Leppard and we've got Judas Priest. And I was like, well, I didn't sing Def Leppard on the show, nothing against them, but this is, if Judas Priest wants to perform on American Idol with me after I performed Judas Priest on Idol, by myself, like, this is really full circle and this is really, really special. And KK Downing had recently left the band, so I didn't know, like, leading up to that, I didn't know if it was really going to happen or not. And they got Richie Faulkner in there, and that was his first show with the band, was performing with me on Idol. And just, it was so much fun. So much fun. I've kept in contact with Rob, and even working on my new album, The Beast Awakens. Like, when I wrote the title track, I sent it to Rob, like, the very next day to get his thoughts on it. And, he basically said, like, you're on the right track. Like, this is a good indication. And he was one of the first people I sent the album to after it was finished, completed, the final master, and heard back from him just before Christmas saying that he'd been listening to it and he's been really enjoying it. So, like, that's really it. Who freaking knew that just playing You've Got Another Thing Coming on Idol would have such a ripple effect. That might not mean a lot to Joe in Wichita, but it means the world to me, and I'm just keep living.
It's funny, I met Richie at NAMM, and that was something I asked him. I said, how was it, like, your first time with Priest is on Idol? And he just said, yeah, that completely made him, the happiest person ever. So I know he has very fond memories of doing that performance as well.
That's awesome to hear. I haven't heard that. But yeah, it's something. You're not really sure how that's going to... Different people look at TV performances in different ways, and it's really nice that Rob and the guys saw it in such a way, and that their management also saw it in such a way to that it could do nothing but elevate them. Zach Wilde made the choice to come on there and perform with me. I asked him, I didn't beg, but I said, like, this would be really cool, and he agreed to it. And so it's like, TV is TV, and just because something has been one way for so long doesn't mean it doesn't have the opportunity to change. And a pop dominated show can still have metal. I've been waiting for, like, a Polka King to go to go on there. That'd be great. But it maybe the little things I did with Priest and Zach, paved the way for my buddy Caleb Johnson to go on 3 seasons later and take the crown singing Whitesnake and Led Zeppelin and Kiss and that sort of thing.
So after Idol, you did the really excellent album Memories of a Beautiful Disaster. Tell me about working with Marti Frederickson and James Michael. I'm sure because of his influence, obviously gives it a bit of that kind of 6 a.m. sort of vibe to it. Tell me about doing that album.
Yeah, definitely. James is one of my favorite songwriters, and Marti, Marti was there too. God, Marti's incredible. They were on my short list of writers that I really, really wanted to work with, and the fact that I got to work with both of them on the same song, on Higher Than Heaven, and, like, hang out by the pool and eat chips and guacamole and write this kick-ass song, and we got the structure of the song, but we weren't set up to do vocals there. We had to do, like, a really rough vocal, and then we kept working on it, and I got to go have lunch or dinner, had to go have sushi with James, another opportunity. And he's just like, there's really good people in the music industry. There's a lot of assholes too, but there's really good people, and both those guys are on that list. And after I did Memories of a Beautiful Disaster, when I was working on my second album, what would later end up being my pop album, Celebrate, I originally went to Nashville, and I wrote with James Michael. He was set to produce the album, and unfortunately it didn't work out between him and the record label. But I went and I was at his house every day for 3 months, writing every single day. And Marti was there a couple times, and we wrote some great songs. And I really wish that had been the album that we were able to do at that time, but the label just didn't believe in it. But still, like, getting to work with one of my heroes every single day at his house, under his wing, really picking apart his note scale. He has a really beautiful note scale that he picks from, and he writes these emotional, deep, macabre lyrics, and just how he goes from majors to minors and just this, I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it, but James is still to this day one of my favorite songwriters. And I just consider all that time as such a blessing, whether it was meant to be for those songs to be released or not, which it was not meant to be. But just to get that time made me a better songwriter.
For sure. No, I mean, especially, I mean, you hear the songs the guys have, he's written on his own even, and it's just like, yeah, the guy definitely knows what he's doing. As far as producing memories, how was Howard Benson like to work with as a producer? I mean, the guy's engineered so much of my lesser known hair metal collection, so, and obviously now he's just become one of the biggest producers. How was he in the studio?
It was great. Howard was awesome. He'd come in every day, like wearing the Howard Benson uniform of black sweats and black sweatshirt and, black Crocs, and come in with his chicken pot pie and get right to work after like a 40-mile round trip bike ride in the morning. But he was great. I mean, we made that album in like 2.5 weeks. The album was really, really rushed. So there's a lot that happened behind the scenes that I was not there for to see, but I was in there for a very short amount of time, just cutting all the vocals. And he was really great, really guided me through those vocal sessions, and really the making of my first real in-studio full-on album. Like, I'd made little albums before with bands growing up, but it's always, in Craig's mom's garage or whatever, it's nothing on this scale. And, different people floating in each day. We had Hailstorm come in one day because, like, at the time that he was making my album, he was also making a Daughtry album, a Theory of a Dead Man album, and a Hailstorm album. So all those guys kept coming through, which was really great, to be able to connect with people on that level, of people to be like, hey, dude, really enjoyed you, really enjoyed what you're doing, and we're here for it, and to, because those are the people that you run into more and more on the road. Like, I've ran into Hailstorm so many times on the road, or took my wife to go see, my wife and I, we went and saw Eric Church in concert at the time that his Outsiders album was out, and Lizzie was featured on a song with him, and subsequently they opened for him on the tour. So then we're backstage, shotgunning beers in their dressing room and in their bathroom and whatnot, and then going out and seeing the concert. So just great people that you get to, run into as you go. But yeah, working with Howard was awesome. And we had Phil X played guitar on the album, and Mick Mars played guitar on the album, and just such a great experience all in all.
That's fantastic. For your third album, you've got the single Smackdown. Mm-hmm. Tell me about, I guess, sort of, was that intended to be a wrestling song?
Yes. It's funny. So Howard Benson's son, Grady Benson, as well as a couple other songwriters, Ideen Abunaseri and Joe Netto, the three of them had written a song on Memories of a Beautiful Disaster titled Deeper. And so when it came time for me to find songs for what would be my third release, Riot on Sunset, I contacted Ideen again. And he had this song that the three of them had written, and they titled it, they had written it for me. The demo title was WWE for Durbin.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, and I go in and hear the song and record a demo with them, and it was awesome. And it wouldn't be until like a year, after I recorded it, it was probably like maybe a year after that, that I actually was like, I'm going to record this, take this from a demo and actually put it on an album. And yeah, it's really in that wrestling mindset. It's too wrestling. It's so wrestling and so much that wrestling wouldn't use it, which is a good lesson to learn. But made the music video, and I found that there was a local wrestling promotion that happened to be in Santa Cruz at the time, and I got a hold of the guy that ran it, the main promoter, Ron, and he happened to live literally a block behind me, and that's where the wrestling ring was. So I found a location, and we were originally supposed to have like 11 hours to film. We ended up only having like 3 hours to film, which I had to go rent a truck, and then I helped them load the ring, and like almost took off a finger and of my own. And then we went and I helped them assemble the ring, and we got everything set up, and we filmed the music video in an hour, because we had an hour to set up, an hour to do it, and an hour to tear down. But yeah, that was a hell of a time.
Are you a big fan of wrestling then, having done the song?
I always have been. I'm staring at a picture of Macho Man Randy Savage my wife got me, and I've got a Rey Mysterio tattoo on my arm. So yes.
So just a slight fan, I take it then, yeah.
Just a slight fan. My fandom has ebbed and flowed over the years. Following Idol, I did work with WWE with their Be a Star anti-bullying campaign. But you don't solve anything being anti something. You solve the problem being pro the opposite. Pro love, pro friendship, pro positivity. So, but I did that, and they flew me out to WrestleMania, and we did some Be a Star campaigns in Miami, and that was WrestleMania maybe 28 or 29, where John Cena and The Rock faced off for the first time, and Triple H and Undertaker had the Hell in a Cell match with Shawn Michaels as the referee. Because I was friends with Jericho also at the time, I got to go and sit front row at the WWE Hall of Fame where Edge got inducted that night. It was Jericho and CM Punk were facing off in one of the main events for the WWE title the following night. So they showed, oh God, what's the singer of Rancid? I can't think of his name right now. So it was him and CM Punk sitting there. And then they shift to the other side, and it's Jericho, his wife, and I sitting on the other side. So it was just great, getting to experience all that kind of stuff. But these days, I don't have cable, so I just kind of watch different highlights on YouTube and sometimes keep up with what's going on SmackDown. Not so much Raw, but I've really been enjoying AEW. And, I like to support my friends where my friends are, so...
Sure. Well, I was going to ask, you mentioning Jericho, I'll bet she's probably a fan of AEW, so I saw it a little bit when it first debuted, and I have not kept up with anything, so I'm way behind.
It's got an indie darling sort of a vibe to it, which is fun. It's nice being along for the ride of it while it's in its infancy. So, but they do some really great things, and it's nice to be a part of. I really enjoy the Dark Order. And of course, the stuff that Jericho's doing, and Kenny Omega is just on a roll, reuniting the Bullet Club now, and just some really fun stuff for some super fans.
For sure. No, I'm hoping at some point he's going to get back with Kota Ibushi, but I mean, it being separate promotions, I don't know if or when that'll ever happen.
I think it most definitely will happen. I mean, AEW right now is doing a partnership with Impact. So they've got Kenny Omega was just on Impact Wrestling's latest pay-per-view, Hard to Kill, with the Good Brothers, with Gallows and Anderson. So there's talks of bringing in New Japan as well, because I know that from listening to different podcasts and stuff, the Talkin' Shop podcast with Gallows and Anderson, as well as Rocky Romero. Rocky is in the corporate area of New Japan, so there is talks, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, getting the Golden Lovers back together, that's gonna be one for the books.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that'd be amazing. So after that, you were with Quiet Riot for a couple years, and I actually caught you guys at Heavy Montreal.
Nice.
2 years ago or so. It was amazing set.
Thank you.
Is there anything from that show that you remember besides the incredible backstage area?
Oh yeah, of course. My boots I was wearing were very slick on the stage, so I was not able to be as mobile as I usually am. So I remember that. I do remember we had Johnny Kelly playing with us at that point. Johnny's still there and has taken up the helm where Frankie sat, and is continuing as the drummer of Quiet Riot. So wish those guys all the best in the world. And just a hell of a show. God, great audience. What fun to look out from the stage there, and just when we pulled up to the stage, I think I saw somebody else performing, and it was like, oh, this stage thing with like the lights and these cool, like they look like captain's wheels or like hubcaps or something. They looked really cool, and I was like, oh man, that'd be cool if we had something that we brought with us like that. I mean, it was very bare bones, we didn't even have a roadie. So I was very surprised and stoked to see that was the stage set up for everybody, and wish that we had gotten a chance to hang out more, but we did have to get going. I would have loved to have caught Ghost.
Yeah, I had seen them open for Maiden. I don't really know much about them, and I enjoyed that show. And then my next time seeing them was Heavy Montreal, and I was like, wow, okay. And because they were headlining, there was such a step up in production and everything else as well. And yeah, what a great live band. It's one of those, they're on the list of at some point I've actually got to listen to their music more. But what I heard that night, I mean, they're almost like Alice Cooper performing Metallica's Black Album. At least that's kind of how I think of them.
One of my buddies calls them the Satanic Bee Gees. Because it's super Satan-y, but it's very melodic. It's very singy. So much melody, so many hooks. I mean, he's like a crooner. He's more of a Jim Morrison in a way. But the commitment to the shtick, the commitment to the gimmick it's commendable. He's wearing full-blown latex masks, and wearing latex for one is not comfortable. Sweating in them and having a full-blown mask over your entire head and singing and doing an entire show is a completely different thing, and completely embodying that persona is another step up.
Tell me, just kind of stepping back briefly, I realize I completely forgot to ask this. How did you come to join Quiet Riot? I know you'd done some stuff with Alex Grossi before, right? Is that how kind of you got into the band? Yeah,
that's pretty much it. Frankie had contacted me beforehand to see if I would be interested in joining, and I was interested, but I had just signed on to do a residency show in Las Vegas, and he said that I couldn't do both, so I was like, well, okay. All right, cool. At least I've got this other thing. So I went and did that other thing, and happened to connect with Alex down there, and we had met really briefly before a few times through different relationships, and we hit it off again like we'd known each other forever. And we started writing, and we started a songwriting team called Hollywood Scars, and I revived an old band that I was in, and we just kind of hit it off from there. And we were in the studio recording an EP, and while we were there, Frankie had sent over a song of like, heard some of the stuff you and Alex are doing, it sounds great, here's a song we didn't use on the new Quiet Riot album, maybe you can find something to write. And that song ended up being Can't Get Enough, which would go on to be the first QR single and the first QR music video in like 29 years. So, that was really something, this song that I wrote in like 10 minutes. I maybe would have written a better song if I had known that I'd have to be performing it and all that stuff. It was kind of like here we go. Let's just, Alex put down like a one-take guitar solo, literally one take of just like whatever vibe it fit, and that was the solo that he ended up playing, and that was the song. It was pretty funny. We wrote it in like a 10-minute span, and I did one vocal on it, and he did one solo on it, and that ended up kind of being my audition.
It's funny how that works out. I mean, you look at Black Sabbath Paranoid, same thing. They wrote in 10 minutes, just, okay, this fills out the album, and that becomes one of their biggest hits. Or, there's so many stories through rock of exactly that, where it's the throwaway song, and that's the one everybody loves.
Right,
or it becomes a single.
There's really something to that. It's in its simplicity. And, I would have been a little more simplistic with Can't Get Enough, because there's a lot of frickin' words in there, and it was no fun to sing.
Yeah, that makes it tough too, is you over-sing something in the studio, and then you get out live, and it's like, crap, I've got to do this night after night after night, and try and not suffocate and die while I'm trying to get this vocal line out.
Exactly. There's a few things on the new album that we're going to be down-tuning or something. But, some of those things, you're like, I'm in quarantine, I'm making this album. Who knows when we're going to be touring? Who knows? It could be 2 years. Let me sing this song as high as I can and all this. But hell, it's good for the album, and you get there and you get that adrenaline flowing, and there's no way you're not going to hit those notes.
Of course. So what a perfect segue. So let's talk finally about The Beast Awakens, coming out on February 12th on Frontiers. And I've got to say, there's no way to sugarcoat this, but I really like this album. Like,
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate that.
This is the album that everyone who saw that Judas Priest thing has been waiting for. Like, Memories was great, and your other stuff was great, and Quiet Riot, but it's like, everyone's going, okay, where's the metal? We want to hear James sing the metal, and we finally got it, So
right.
Was it Frontiers who approached you to do a metal album? Yeah?
Yeah, technically. I had, of course, done a couple records with QR, and they were with Frontiers at the time. So when I had stepped down publicly, they were the first email in my inbox. I knew that, I don't know, there was just kind of a standstill, and we couldn't agree on terms going forward. So I just said, see ya. I wish you guys all the best, et cetera, et cetera. And I do, I wish them all the best, and great guys. And Frontiers was the first email in my inbox, and I kind of replied of like, what kind of album do you guys want me to make? And they said, well, what album do you want to make? And I said, well, classic heavy metal. And they were like, yep, we agree. Right answer, buddy. And, you got yourself a deal. So we just hit it off from there.
That's fantastic. So, on this album, you've got quite the cast for it. Barry Sparks from Dokken and a million other things on bass, Mike Vanderheel from Y&T on drums, Phil Demmel, Chris Jericho, who we talked about. Did you have certain people in mind already of who you were going to record with the album with, or did you collaborate with Frontiers on that, or?
No, Barry had contacted me just before I signed with Frontiers and was thinking of like, okay, well, I've got this side project thing I'm putting together. I thought you might be a good fit for, and I just didn't really feel the songs. And at the time I was, talking to Frontiers and getting this idea of the album I wanted to create. So Barry kind of left it on, anything that you might be recording. And I told him I got a record deal with Frontiers. He's like, wow, like, can I play on the album? I'll do it. I'll just do it. You don't have to worry about anything. I'll just record it. And I was like, wow, that's huge. Yeah, sure. All right. Yeah, buddy, here you go. And so, he was locked in. I had opened a couple shows for Y&T, a string of shows with my guitarist, Mark Putnam, who also plays on a couple songs on the record. And at our final show with Y&T, I was talking to Mike, and he was like, hey, if you ever need a drummer for anything, I'd love to play on something with you. And his vibe fits right in there with that, John Bonham and that Vinny Appice sort of, really that Vinny Appice feel. He reminds me of Vinny so much. I've never met Vinny, but just watching his playing and just watching him. And he studied under Steve Smith of Journey, and just great technique and great playing sensibilities. And so he was in, and I had written all the songs, so I just figured I'd play rhythms, which I will not be doing live whenever we get to that point. I'll let other people do it so I can just take the helm of the storyteller. But just different guitar players locally here in Santa Cruz. Good friends, old friends, new friends, and really just wanted to highlight people in that way. And Jericho, of course, I've known Jericho since Idol. And asked him, hey, buddy, hypothetically, if you were to sing on a concept album of sorts, what kind of character would you want to play? And he said, well, I'd either want to be the villain or some kind of a wizard. And I said, that's the right answer. You are a wizard. You'll be the wizard in the song that comes down on the dark side of a rainbow and says, you, sir, are the defender of the land, from the hills to the horizon, from the holy to the desperate and the damned. You are the kings before you that reigned before you, became the heir to the throne. And like the kings before you, I can assure you will never stand alone. No, no. And he was sold. I met Phil through Chris, actually, at a Fozzy show in San Francisco, where Phil and I ended up on stage with Fozzy doing AC/DC's Thunderstruck, and we stayed in contact. So he just ended up being the perfect piece to fit into that song with Chris and everybody. So yeah, it's been a real blessing. And there's a couple other guys that provided, textures and pads and synths and things. Earl Salindo and Paul Grimm, and a couple other guys locally here that I just really enjoyed spending time with. And produced and mixed by my pit drummer buddy from my childhood theater shows, Ellison, and mastered by Father Rick Vieira at Rocker Studios. And Rick produced and mixed and mastered my Riot on Sunset album.
That's so cool how, on the one hand on this album, you've got some of these big names, but you've also got, I think it kind of grounds it, to have old friends and people locally and whatnot to kind of maintain that balance of, you've got that kind of enthusiasm of, oh, hell yeah, I get to do something with Durbin, let's bring it, as opposed to, not to say anybody phoned in their performances, but it's like, it kind of gives it that sort of edge to it,
Yeah, there's a real simplistic approach. There's a real, not an adolescence, but there's something to this album that is just different. Having to record it under quarantine issues and that sort of thing, everybody did their stuff on their own. The guitar solos, I reached out to people to see if they wanted to play on the demos, not knowing what these songs would become, what they would grow into. And what everybody provided for the demos, there was no pressure. This was for a demo that sounded good and a demo that was a realized idea. But, I didn't put any pressure on people to be like, okay, you're writing a solo that'll go on my album. It was just, what do you think of playing a solo on this? And without people having that sort of a pressure to know that that's going to be, what's going to live for the rest of time, as this album will, as all albums do, whether they flounder in the bargain bin or even heard of. I consider an album in a bargain bin at Goodwill or something. Somebody loved it. Somebody took the time to listen to it. So that's a success. Small victories. Yoo-hoo. And, but, just there's such a relaxed nature to what everyone's playing on this album. I feel like nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels overplayed. It's very like the type of metal that I wanted to create for this first album, for the actual awakening of said beast, is to be in that kind of early stages of metal, more simplistic, more melodic, something that people can really sing and something that people can grab onto, a riff that you can sing. These riffs, the majority of them started as voice memos on my phone of me going, like the title track, The Beast Awakens. It's literally me on a voice memo going, and playing on my lap. Like the accents, the hits, and everything, like all came from my voice. So you can really sing along. And as I'm writing, I'm thinking like, okay, I want like a European crowd or a Canadian crowd, like Heavy Montreal, thinking back to that, like 30,000 strong singing the words to, these songs and the melodies. Like I love doing that with QR, of like getting people to sing the melody of the intro of Metal Health, like that. Oh, like it's like these Gregorian thing, I just love that. It was my own little thing I could bring to it. But like the same with these songs, if divine intervention, if God willing, these songs, if one of these songs could have any sort of effect on people, if I can get a crowd of 100 people strong packed into a tiny club all singing oh, 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 to the Beast Awakens or Necromancer, like oh, 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 like these things, like just manufacturing that in my mind really makes for it to, that stuff can happen.
I think to how many, you mentioned crowds in Europe, but I mean, I've definitely written songs exactly for that reason, to have a, like you say, to sing along to, I think of Iron Maiden's Fear of the Dark, or I don't know if you know the band Ed Guy, but half of their live stuff is the crowd just singing every melody on the album, or even guitar solos and stuff, like that to me is just the coolest. It's funny too, you mentioning writing songs, because that's all my phone is 50 memo pads of riffs exactly like that, yeah. So you've got this new album. Do you have anything kind of planned for the future? Like, do you think, will you do another solo album like this? You kind of alluded to it, or any other projects maybe you can mention that are coming up? I
mean, I'm definitely looking forward to doing more Durbin albums. This is something that I'm laying the groundwork with this album, that if I'm fortunate enough to get the opportunity to do another one, I'm very much looking forward to that. I have song ideas, more voice memos, more notepads, more notes written of different ideas of songs and characters and trials for the Prince of Metal, who will he return as the prince? Will he return as the king? Will he return as someone forgotten? Will it be like a Zelda Breath of the Wild thing where he's been locked up and he doesn't know who he is? But, who knows? That's what's so much fun about this writing in this fantasy space. That Tolkien, J.K. Rowling sort of, it's up to you. And it's, spoiler alert, I had to kill him at some point, and resurrect him. And sorry, everybody, but to have that weight of like killing a fictional character, someone that you just made up, that's, you've lived with for 5 months, of like, but you're writing these songs for him. Like, I cried for the guy, so it's like, how do I give him a really good resurrection? And then the resurrection ends up as the Japanese bonus track. Stuff like that, It's just like, oh, why is, we can take this 4-minute thing on the end of this song and we can make it the bonus track. How about that? Yeah, let's do that. Sure. But, more projects. I'll probably be doing some projects with Frontiers and maybe a super group here or there or something like that. But I'm happy to be a part of the Frontiers music family and continuing to create awesome music. They still believe in the power of the album. They still believe in the power of rock and of metal. And they've been behind me every step of the way with this album, of telling me when I'm on the right track or telling me when I've veered off in the wrong direction. And then if I believe in a song enough to take it back to the right direction, and which happened with Into the Flames, which is on the album. I just listened to the original of that one, and it's also very Ghost, a lot of keyboard, and it's more like hymn. It's like love metal, but it's so much fun exploring music. And like they say, there's only 12 notes, so it's very challenging, but also very, very fun, very rewarding to be at this point with an album that people have been telling me that they genuinely enjoy it. Rob Halford texted me, said he genuinely enjoyed it. Like, oh my God, what the hell? Like, what's going on? What's happening? I just thought, if I make metal, I want to make it as Durbin. And if I make metal, I want to make like sweet fantasy based, in that Dio world, in that Judas Priest, Defenders of the Faith world, just creating good, fun metal and kind of taking a break from society and the world that we live in today to escape to the realm of Durbin.
For sure.
And you can only do that in metal.
Very true. Well, James, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I've got to say, this was an absolute blast to go from talking to everything. I can't think of an interview I've talked about so much, between musical theater and wrestling and recording DVDs, and I mean,
I know, dude, we went everywhere. That's really awesome. I really enjoyed the interview and loved talking with you. And once I'm able to make it up there, once touring resumes and all that stuff happens. Where'd you say you were? You're in Windsor?
Basically Detroit.
Cool.
I'm right next door.
Oh, okay, cool. So, wherever that may be, let's celebrate it.
That sounds fantastic. I hope you're able to bring it out on the road, and next time you're in the area, I'm hoping to catch you. I've seen you in Quiet Riot, now I've got to hear the metal. I've got to hear the even heavier stuff.
Awesome. Looking forward to it too. I appreciate it, Brandon. Have a good day, man.
All right. Yourself as well. Thanks so much, James.
You got it.
Take it easy.
Bye.